Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. We talk about different categories of wellness and seeking balance between them. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well. And there's overview info on our website, letsbewelltogether.com.
This is episode 4. Welcome back for another session of Let's Be Well Together. I'm Julie Wilson, and this is my first podcast ever.
Well, we're really glad you could be here.
I'm so excited, John. Thank you.
Yeah, let's tell people a little bit about you and how we connected on this wellness topic. And from my perspective, it was, so I had started writing down my thoughts that turned into a manuscript. And I can't remember. Do you remember when it was I contacted you?
It was easily a couple years ago now, because we've got COVID in there in between.
Right.
And it was definitely before then.
You're right. At other times, I explain why I kind of sat on it for a couple of years, but that's another story. So there were some people who said, I'd love to read it. And I was thinking, well, I'd love to get some feedback to see if any of this stuff makes sense. And what I wanted to say to you, and I think I have said a few times, is what I really appreciated and which changed the way I reworked it and did drafts was you said, it's really interesting hearing about how you feel both mentally and physically. You're describing both of those feelings at different times, when you're going through either some good exercise or some downturns. And I'd like to hear more about that.
So John, your book was, the first time I read it, I was so interested. You had some great topics. And once in a while you would just subtly talk about, well, today it made me feel a little bit. And then it would almost break off, and it was almost as if you were reluctant to go there. And
I was definitely reluctant to go there.
And I thought, no, John, you have to delve in there. As difficult as it is, that's what draws people into the stories, because they'll start to relate and say, you know what, I feel like that sometimes. And these are then some really good steps that I can take. This worked for John, maybe I'll give it a try. Might not work for me, but you offer so many different avenues and ways of looking at it, which, is all part and parcel of your wheel and the many different areas that we need to take a look at. So, yeah,
well, I can tell you though, when I read your email, I kind of shut it, closed it, and was like, oh man, I didn't want to think about it. And of course, I can't remember if it was immediately, but a little while later, I said to Sheila, somebody's telling me that I have to get more into the feelings and more about me and more about my experiences. Who would want to hear about that? I don't get it. And Sheila said, I told you, I've been trying to tell you that the whole time. You have to talk. People are interested in stories. I think it did help. And I did really try to go back to it and get past my hesitation and awkwardness and start saying something.
It's hard, John. It's really difficult talking about yourself.
It is. Among other things, you're like, who cares? People are going to say, why do you think we want to read about you? Anyway.
But it's very interesting, everything you've, that you talk about in your books. And there were times when, I related and I was like, oh, I have been there. So I think it was, a smart move to delve into that as difficult as it is.
That is a really good point. And then what happened then is because I got that insight and I was working on it. And then frankly, I let it sit for quite a while.
Sometimes we have to do that though, right? You let things sit and it gives a different perspective. You've lived a little bit more, it's there in your mind. But
it's a great theory. The truth is I just didn't want to tell anybody. I just didn't want it out there. But it is good theory. So then when I was thinking about other things, and I thought about this for a long time, I've been thinking about the podcast since 2019, and then didn't really do anything until 2022. So you can imagine there was a lot of things percolating and ideas, and I like bouncing ideas off you. And so obviously when it came time to actually fire something up, you're one of the first people I called and said, would you be part of this? So I'm really happy that you are.
I am so happy you asked me, because I'm so passionate about mental health and wellness and overall well-being, and your book and everything that you're striving for. That's what I want to see happen. And there's so many different facets that make up who we are, and we need to be aware of those different facets at different times in our lives. So
that's the big issue, is self-awareness. Not letting things happen to us, but instead looking to see what's happening to us and then trying to give a little more direction. But let me focus on you for a bit. So you're in your work, you're trying to work on wellness issues. You're trying to break down stigma. What are some of the things, for example, that you're doing in that context?
One of the very first things that in our workplace that we really focused on was mental health first aid, which is fairly new, actually. It started out, and the reason and how I learned about it was I was at a speaker event and they started talking about Australia. And I understand that in the legal community, there are a number of law firms in Australia that are really big on mental health and wellness, and they talked about mental health first aid. And I thought, I'm going to dig into this a little bit more. And sure enough, the Mental Health Commission of Canada were running programs. Did some searching, and I met Dr. Jennifer Lafayette, and she agreed to help us out with some mental health first aid. And I must say, I am so thrilled that where I worked, they embraced it. We have mental health first aid providers in each of our offices. And it really opened a lot of individuals, their eyes to, because one of the questions is, how do I approach individuals if I know that they're struggling? How do I open up that conversation? What do I say? And I think one of the key takeaways was, don't try and fix it. Listen.
Right. Active listening.
Listen, right? And that was a real key takeaway that I think so many individuals were like, because I think our natural instinct, right, is we want to fix it. And you and I as lawyers, that's sort of something that our job, right, is to look at it and try and fix it. But I think human nature, your first instinct is, I want to fix this. I want to make it better. But when somebody is struggling, that's not your place, is to try and fix it. And we're not professionals, for one thing, but it's just to be there to listen and hopefully help them, think about it when they're struggling again, that, here is someone I can reach out to because they spent that time listening to me, and I know that I can go back to them. So that's one thing that was key, really key in our workplace, was that mental health first aid. And I would encourage anyone to go out. It's like physical first aid, but mental health first aid. And it's the same type of idea that, you're there as someone until the professionals arrive.
I've talked about it quite a few times on the show, and I didn't know you're the one who started it, but I should thank you, because it was really so. You never know. There's 100, there's 1,000. Who knows how many things get to part of an epiphany or the breakthrough I had on wellness, whatever you want to call it. But for sure, I can identify 5 or 6 that are really key. And that was one of them, the mental health first aid training course. Yeah,
you were one of the first individuals as part of the program.
And it was amazing. And I won't get into it now, but there was a couple of things that Dr. Lafayette said that stuck with me. And I wasn't actively thinking about them, but in the back of my mind, they work some magic later on. But more importantly, I just felt so much better. And one of the key lessons about active listening, not cross-examining people who have these issues, not trying to tell them that here's what you should be seeing, not what you are seeing. And it just, I don't know, it just feels so much better knowing that I have a way to talk to somebody and hopefully help them through a tough situation, and hopefully help them find more help if that's what they need, if it's something more serious.
Exactly.
So thank you for that.
No, it was, it's just, it made me feel so good to introduce something like that, and that where I work, my workplace was responsive to it. Right. And John, we could talk about so many others. We'll probably save that for another day, but I can tell you many stories and many things that I'm involved in at work. And for now, let's explore it another day.
Yeah, it's perfect. That's the great thing about an ongoing podcast. We don't have to cover everything at once.
Yeah.
We'll have you back, and thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds.
Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Scott Williams of Spectrum. Let's start with a recap and then head into the interview.
There are as many different ways to be 2S LGBTQ plus as there are 2S LGBTQ plus people. So best to avoid assumptions generally, but this is meant to be a fairly high level guide as an introductory document to help people get started. And we always start with the difference between gender and sexuality because there has been so much conflation of the two. So gender is internal, it's your sense of self, where sexuality has to do with external factors. So who you might be attracted to, for example. So gender identity is just that. It's how you identify your gender, which may not be the same as what the doctor assigns you at birth. So that's the other sort of term that goes along with gender identity is gender expression. And expression is the way that a person expresses who they are to the rest of the world. And that could include a lot of different things from clothing, hairstyles, the way they speak even. Terms and labels like these are not boxes to put people in, but their language is a tool to help us express to other people what we are feeling or thinking. And so we've been socialized for so long in this binary thinking that it can be challenging for us, I think, to open our minds to the idea that there are things beyond that binary.
So non-binary was one of the concepts I struggled to understand, although I feel even just by reading your material and having this discussion, I'm starting to get a much better sense of it. And so I saw some examples and I'm just going to mention them and maybe we can just talk generally. Agender, person who does not have a gender. Bigender, someone with two genders that may or may not occur simultaneously. Demi-boy, demi-girl, someone who partially but not completely identifies with a binary gender. Gender fluid, someone whose genders change over time. Gender queer, an identity that is becoming less common, referring to anyone whose gender is queer or the queering of gender. So I guess what I need to start opening my mind to is like to try and break out of this mold of man, woman, binary, focused on sexual attraction, focused on sexual orientation. And hopefully then I'll start to be able to understand gender a bit better.
Yeah, I think the trick is that we have to, as you say, move out of that binary thinking. Not everything is black and white. And it never has been. It's just that that's the language we've had to describe it. So we have to become much more comfortable living in the gray areas and with movement between things. So often people describe gender as a spectrum where one end is male and the other is female, and then there might be something in between. But when we do our education sessions, we try to think of it more as a circle, really, than just a line, so that there's a lot of movement that can happen. And a non-binary person would say that they are neither male nor female, generally. An agender person would say that they have no gender at all. And there's all kinds of movement between all of these points, and it may change over time. So you may have someone at a young age who says, yeah, I'm a woman. And then later they realize, no, probably I'm non-binary or I'm agender. We just have to be much more comfortable with movement and fluidity.
And let me ask you a little bit too about this concept of self-identification. And so I noticed in your terms to avoid, there are a few of them where if I impose the concept, oh, what do you choose to be today? That's not a great thing. The people just self-identify, and not in the sense that they're like, oh, today, what should I choose to do? I choose to identify. I think what I'm hearing is self-identification is more just what you know about yourself, what you feel about yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say terms like sexual preference or preferred pronouns, those are the ones that we would advise people to stay away from, because they imply that there's some other choice there. So I'm gay, that's not my preferred sexuality, it's the way I was born. It is my sexuality. And If I'm a man and I identify with he, him pronouns, those are my pronouns. They're not preferred pronouns. It's not optional. If I'm telling you those are what the pronouns I would like you to use to refer to me as, that's what you should be using.
Yeah, I know.
So it's really, oh, sorry.
It came as a shock because, I'm doing this and you're one of the first people I'm interviewing. And so I'm trying, because I'm kind of that A-type personality, I'm trying to come up with a framework for each interview and what to tell people and how to conduct them. And so, of course, one of the things they put in the list is ask what their preferred pronouns are. And then I read that and said, oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, now I get it. Okay. It's not a choice. It's in the sense that it's how they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah. And again, they may change over time. It may be that someone finds that they are more comfortable later identifying with they, them pronouns, or there's a whole new category of what they call neo pronouns. So there's lots and lots of different options there. And I think the trick is everybody knows that sort of golden rule to treat others as you would like to be treated. I think we're moving now into the platinum rule, which is to treat others as they would like to be treated. So it's making yourself aware and open to understanding how other people want to be viewed, want to be spoken about, and then doing that.
So if I, for example, if one of my goals is to enhance my own wellness and the wellness of people around me, I should be focused, and I should find it important that people, what their pronouns are and how they like to be referred to.
Yeah, I think pronouns in particular are such a small thing, really.
Right.
And we use them constantly without even thinking about it. It's only because we need to put more thought into it now, because people are using more than just those binary ones that we're so accustomed to.
Right. Okay, so let me shift gears to sexuality and sexual attraction, sexual orientation. As I said earlier, I think a lot of my misunderstanding and confusion came from the fact that for some reason in my head, I was always connecting these terms to attraction and sexuality. So sexuality focuses on the type of people someone is attracted to. And let's talk a little bit about those terms. And another thing I noticed in your terms to avoid, homosexual. I know from studying Greek that homo means the same in the scientific kind of use of the word, and hetero is different. And those concepts are tied to these binary concepts of whether we're attracted to somebody the same or different. So I take it that, terms like homosexual and heterosexual, the issue there in part is that it's reinforcing the binary kind of stereotype that we use. And the preference is to use terms like straight for a man who is attracted to women, or a woman who's attracted to man. And a term like gay for a man who's attracted to a man, lesbian for a woman who's attracted to a woman.
That's partially it. And the other reason is that because those terms are so scientific and they have been sort of medicalized over time, often gay and other queer people prefer not to use them just because they don't want to be referred to in such a highly sort of scientific medical kind of way.
Right.
So it's not that they're incorrect necessarily, it's just that language is sort of evolving to move past them in everyday speech.
So if I am talking to someone from the community, or anyone really, I should assume that they probably don't want me to use the term homosexual. That's a safe that's a safe assumption.
Probably, yeah. Often, like, I still sometimes refer to myself as homosexual, or I will say my group of friends, we're a group of homosexuals, and that's fine because it's, I'm within the community, and that's sort of it's not incorrect. It's just a matter of preference.
Okay. What's interesting, I thought too, is under bisexual, the definition in your guide there was that it speaks of being attracted to more than one gender, but possibly not all genders. And frankly, I was a little confused there. Like, what are all genders?
Yeah. So bisexual traditionally was really in that binary sense, meaning that you were both attracted to men and women. But more recently, people who are bisexual might say that they're attracted to two genders, but not necessarily men and women. So they may be attracted to women and non-binary folks, for example. And then an even newer term is pansexual, which is similar. It means that you are potentially attracted to any gender, on that wheel or the spectrum, but not necessarily all of them. Yeah, bisexual is 2 and pan is more than. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, I just want to go through, I think 4 or 5 that I wrote down here, just that I found interesting. So we have questioning, someone who's unsure or questioning their gender or sexuality. So it comes into play with both. Ace or asexual, doesn't experience sexual attraction and may not experience other kinds of attraction. Pansexual, as you just mentioned, attraction does not depend on gender. Aromantic. So aromantic, not a romantic.
Yes.
Someone who doesn't experience romantic attraction and may not experience other types of attraction. And queer is noted as, once used as an insult, it's a reclaimed term for someone who's not cis or straight. So cisgender or straight. Yeah, so it was interesting. Like, it never even occurred to me to think of things like asexual or aromantic.
Yeah, we tend to think about attraction and sexuality in those binary terms also. You're either single or you're in a relationship, but there are people who are aromantic or asexual or both who may not be interested in a relationship at all, or may not be interested in sexuality at all. So it's just a matter of being open and being more welcoming in our language, to being more inclusive of those folks. So we're not always keeping our language in these cis heteronormative places. We're being more inclusive to make sure that we're aware that somebody in the room could be asexual or aromantic.
I haven't actually written any novels, but I kind of like the idea of writing sometimes and storytelling, at least in my own mind. And I find that this is also fascinating because it opens up people to describe people in all different ways I'd never even thought of before. And I think it's a much richer way to describe the human experience if we can all start getting a better sense of these different meanings and these different concepts and attraction and whatnot. Okay, so one thing I was trying to figure out when I read through this is, so if I read the definition of lesbian, for example, a woman who is attracted to women, I'm wondering if that builds in the gender concept. So for example, does that mean a cisgender woman who's attracted to a cisgender woman who identifies as female? Like, so for example, okay.
Yeah. You could also have a cisgender woman attracted to a transgender woman, which it would still be a lesbian relationship. Or 2 trans women who would still be a lesbian relationship potentially. Okay.
So these concepts, they're kind of falling into each other, interplaying with each other.
Mm-hmm. I think there is even debate around the term lesbian, and some women who might identify as gay might not prefer the term lesbian. But that's something that some other guests would have to speak to.
Okay, so as usual, I can't believe time is literally flying here. we're almost done. It just surprises me because I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So let me ask you a couple loose end questions, and then I have a question I ask every guest. So first of all, I just want to point out you have a YouTube channel that you directed me to, and I appreciate that. How can our listeners find it so they can watch some videos about people talking about these subjects?
Yeah, so if you visit our website, which, as you said, ourspectrum.com, there's a link to the YouTube channel there. Or Spectrum Waterloo Region, I think, is the channel's name. And we've been creating a series of videos, short, between 4 and 6 minutes, on a variety of topics. We've interviewed 14 or 15 local 2S LGBTQ folks to get their personal experiences, and they're quite eye-opening, some of them.
And can you tell me, what does 2SLBGTQ plus stand for?
Yeah, so the initialism, the 2S stands for Two Spirit, and we put it at the beginning to reference the idea that Two Spirit Indigenous people were here before the other identities. L stands for lesbian, G for gay, B for bisexual, T for transgender, Q for queer or questioning, And then the plus indicates that there are a whole lot of other identities, some of which we've discussed here, that might be included. So the spectrum, we tend to say that we're the Rainbow Community Center, so referring to rainbow as just an easier way than the mouthful that is the initials are. Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been really helpful. You've been very patient with me, and I appreciate that. I do have a better sense of things, and I appreciate that too. So let me now turn. I ask all my guests the same couple questions. This is a show about wellness and how we try and get balance in our lives, get balance in different areas of wellness. So here we go. So here's the question. If you think about different facets or categories of wellness, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of an activity you can do to foster wellness in that area?
Yeah, I'll just say first, thank you for reaching out to us and for inviting us to be part of this, and for being open and interested in learning. So that's really crucial, and we appreciate it. Wellness. I'm going to say for me that when I think about wellness, I think about the 5 ways to mental well-being that the Waterloo Region Public Health has adopted. So those include connect, be mindful, be active, give back, and keep learning. And for me, the challenging one is always the be active, especially now that we're in this pandemic and I've been, basically sitting in front of my desk for 2 years without moving very much. It's hard to motivate myself to do even the basics. So that's the area that I need to be working on the most right now.
Well, if you start listening to our podcast when we come out, one of the huge focuses of our podcast, what kind of led to my thinking on wellness, is I went from being sedentary to getting back to that physical health side. And all I can say is I encourage you to do something, even go for a walk. Something, start slow. It doesn't have to be high intensity, but I agree. Get out there, go for a walk, especially if you can find a walk on a path and some trees, and you'll feel better. So, Scott, thanks very much for joining us today. I appreciate your insights and help. And that's it from my side.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
I'm Cameron, and this is The Adventures of the Starving Artist. This week was a great change of pace on my end of things. I had the chance to go down to Colorado and meet up with 3 of my closest friends, whom I haven't seen in 6 straight years. It's been a long time coming, but we finally had a chance to make it happen, and so we all got together and headed up to the mountains. We spent a few days up there enjoying the views and the cold, fresh air, and since we're all musical, we had a little bit of a chance to jam together and shoot the breeze about what everyone's doing musically in their lives. One of the coolest things that came from it was the decision to revive an old project that my friend JC and I had done. When we were in school, we started a jingle company, and we had a few jingles that we wrote and produced, including one for a farmer's market way out in Hawaii, which is kind of cool. But during this trip, we decided to get that going again, and we've added the other 2 guys to the team. So we're going to be diving into doing some production of jingles and library tunes. So that's the kind of stuff you might hear in a commercial on the radio or on TV. I'm excited to get the old creative juices flowing again, especially with such a great team of talented musicians like those guys. And speaking of those guys, and the fact that we're all musical, JC has an album out. It's been out for a while now. It's called Blackout Poetry, and he's under the artist name JC James Anderson. You can check him out on Spotify, iTunes, you name it, he's out there. Really talented songwriter, incredible lyricist. I very much encourage you to check it out. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
If you like what we're doing and enjoy the show, please spread the word about us. Connect with us on social media. We post regularly on our Instagram account, including show previews and takeaways after a show is aired. Feel free to comment and send us your thoughts. Follow our Instagram account. It's at lets.be.wellness. together. We do have a Facebook and Twitter page, but Instagram is our primary social media site. Please also subscribe to us and rate us on your favorite podcast platform.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
I would like to talk about our go-to move your body.
Our go-to.
Can you guess?
Walking.
Exactly.
Yep.
Walking.
We always like to walk. When we're feeling lazy, especially.
Yeah, if we're feeling lazy or, maybe it's a holiday and we just had a big meal. Or it's been 2 days of binge watching some show or something on a couple days when you finally have a couple days off. One of us will invariably say, can we go for a walk?
I do like walking by myself and listen to podcasts though too. Like sometimes I get addicted to podcasts and I'm like, I'm going to go for a walk so I can listen to podcasts for like an hour.
Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't actually remember you doing that, like taking off. Maybe it's not when I'm not here.
When you're working.
Right. So, and there's all kinds of different walks. So the typical walk would be on sidewalks, just on the streets. And we try and go on the less beaten paths to the degree that we can. We do have some, it's great. We're lucky because we're close to some places where there are paths where very, very few cars, but sometimes we walk on busy roads too on the sidewalks.
Yes. But we usually try and avoid the busiest streets.
True. And then
we do small streets and parks and graveyards.
Graveyards, yes. There's a big graveyard by our house with lots of paths. It's a 1.8 kilometers around. Mm-hmm. And that's just the outside, and there's a bunch of little ones. So that's awesome. Mm-hmm. My favorite kind of walking, though, is walking on trails. There's this one picture of me and you walking on a path, and it was a just beautiful fall day with the leaves changing color.
My favorite time to walk.
I can just taste the fresh air. But
Kitchener-Waterloo has some wonderful paths. Like the Ironhorse Trail is lovely, but it's very busy. There's just some really nice ones by the Grand River and in the forest.
And for me, how I found most of them myself. So this is just a little tip for people out there. Whether or not you're a runner, there are apps for exercise. So examples include things like ASICS Runkeeper, Under Armour Map My Run, even Google Maps. And so for a long time, I was using some of those running apps to plot out my runs before I went. And the problem is Google's a little tougher for me to figure out how I can measure distance, but it's just a little more, you have to push the mouse more times. Mm-hmm. Where some of these other running apps, if you see somewhere that you're interested in, you can kind of click along the path and it follows the road.
Right.
And then you can unclick that and go through some, shortcuts and stuff like that. Anyway, the point is, have a look. And the other thing for us in Kitchener, wherever you live, if you look at your city website or your region website, you can find trail maps. So between map services on the internet and running apps on the internet, or even on your phone, or city maps or city trails, you'd be amazed at what you can find close to you where you can just see some beautiful paths.
Like I'm sure every city has beautiful trails. But the thing that I like to do when I'm walking is to set a goal, like maybe go to the grocery store and get some milk or go visit someone. Like I like an end,
right.
Kind of I guess a productive reason why we're walking besides just to get fresh air and exercise.
Yeah, a guy I used to work with, he would do that. He would find a reason to walk, a kilometer away to pick something up and then come home.
Yeah.
And then I started doing it a bit too. I tend to be more of I want to get my miles in or get my kilometers in, I should say. And so I picked that distance.
Yeah, but it's kind of fun to pick a delicacy or, a special store that you have to go a good hour walk to, get there and back. So anyways, walking is great.
It's been my go-to, and it will always be my go-to.
Yes.
And it makes me feel good.
And I love it too.
There's a thought. Popped up while running.
I didn't start out to get a book published. I started out just writing down my thoughts so I could work through things myself, try and make sense of the breakthroughs I was having. Then I wanted to leave some notes for my kids and I figured that I could add context to make it easier to read the story and explain why I was so surprised when later in life, well, maybe midlife, I guess, I came up with this stuff. And then the framework started to become pages, and the pages started to become a manuscript. And then I was lucky to have friends and family who agreed to read it and give me feedback. So then I would revise the manuscript, I'd refine my thinking. And then I got to a point where it was pretty much done, but I just sat on it for quite a while. I'm a private person, and, if you'd ever, I've actually gotten off social media, as I've said before, and most of my posts are gone, but had you seen them at the time, there was nothing really personal in them. It would be a picture of me running, or maybe a picture on a trip, something like that. So to actually put something out as a published book with a whole bunch of personal stories was just something that seemed taboo to me. So I didn't do anything. I just sat on it. And you can imagine me being out running, I would think about things a lot. And most of the time it was positive. I thought maybe if I shared my experiences, it might inspire people to look to wellness themselves. Even if I could maybe help one or two people, it would be worth putting it out there. I wasn't sure what to do with it, whether to just put it out there in the form I had it, whether to take it to someone to get it edited. A lot of my friends told me it should get edited because that would really improve things and make it more readable and understandable. But then, having those positive thoughts, then there'd be days where I'd have negative thoughts. Things like second guessing myself. It's probably terrible. Nobody would want to read it. And that still might be true, by the way. And maybe my so-called epiphany is just such basic, rudimentary common sense that it would be an embarrassment to call it an epiphany. People might laugh at me. I don't know. But there were definitely negative thoughts. I wondered how I would look as a lawyer to other people in my profession or in my career. If I talk about being kind to people, does that make me look soft? In any event, there was mostly positive, but a good stream of negative thoughts going through my mind. So I wasn't sure what to do, so I just sat on it. I would still tinker with it once in a while, make a few changes, but really it didn't progress very much for some months. And then, I started to hear people around me telling their stories, people like Beth Beattie, who we've heard from, and Michael Herman, who we will hear from, both who are lawyers and, in my view, daring ones. They dared to tell people about their mental health struggles, all in an effort to break down stigma and make people in our industry and everywhere feel more comfortable talking about mental health. I'd seen over the years, there's been a pretty seismic shift in how people treat others in the LGBTQ2 world from when I was young to now. And of course, there's still a lot more changes that have to be made. But what I saw was people expressing themselves, putting themselves out there, and positive change happening. So more and more, as on my runs, I eventually knew what I was going to do. I was going to put myself out there in my book. I was going to start this podcast. We built a podcast team committed to being honest while we explore wellness, together with our guests who give their time, and other people like listeners. We could share experiences, not only hopes and successes, but failures and setbacks, all with a view of building wellness in ourselves and in each other. So just imagine this scene for a moment. You're outside, preferably in nature, enjoying fresh air, maybe feeling a light wind brush against your cheek. I'm running in my version of this story. Maybe you're out for a walk or a bike ride. Imagine that scene and how you feel. And now imagine how much better it feels if you're daydreaming about what a difference we can make working on wellness together. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
Hi, everyone. We're back, flip side of the coin. So today we're going to talk about our language and how we talk, how we're finding that we're speaking on the podcast. And it's quite irritating, actually.
Yeah, we're noticing that we repeat the same things at the start of sentences when we describe things. And I guess it's happened our whole life, but until we started listening to these segments to see how they're going, I didn't notice it as much.
Yeah, I know.
So
100%.
100%. So one of Sheila's is 100%, although I don't remember that happening too many times on these segments. Now I'm noticing it outside when we're talking.
I'm pretty sure that we noticed it on these segments first. So I'm trying not to say that. And I'm doing a pretty good job, actually, 90% of the time.
and I always knew going into it that I often start a sentence saying it's interesting, or before I say a story, it's interesting, or it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Is
though
it funny?
it may not be, but
Most of the time it isn't.
and the one that caught me by surprise is basically. I think I say
basically.
that 20 times a show.
Yeah. So let's not say that anymore.
We'll try not to. So we're trying to catch ourselves, but then, so now we have almost this game away from the mic where every time we say one of these things, then we repeat it, which is, it's one thing when you're by yourselves, but it's pretty funny when you're in a group setting.
Yeah, is it funny? It's pretty funny.
Oh,
Is it funny?
No, I think that was a fair use of funny.
It is
'cause I
a
was
fair use of
describing.
funny. That's how we catch each other saying it. Basically, that's how we catch each other saying it.
Yeah. So we'll be talking to people and maybe I say it's interesting and she'll goes, is it interesting? And then someone else, they'll be thinking, oh, that's that couple, they're always shooting barbs at each other. But that's not it. We're just joking with each other.
Yeah, trying.
Yeah, because it is funny.
Isn't it ironic?
In the funny word.
I guess we could. Isn't it ironic or
I think we
erroneous?
just have to start telling the story.
Yes, I know it. I know, but
It's so the other thing that I think a lot of cultures do. So Canada, we're known to say "a" at the end of a lot of sentences, or "isn't it?" So you say, something happened, blah, blah, "a," or it's cold outside, "a," or isn't it? And when I watch some of the British comedies that I like or British TV shows, they tend to say something else at the end of their sentence. And I'm sure in the States they say something else.
yeah, for sure.
And then the other thing that I'm noticing when I'm listening to the segments is during my interviews, I have this tendency in between questions. So I let the guest finish saying something and I tend to say, and so then, right. Yes. So then, and now it's in my head. So I'm doing it during the interview. Then it kind of distracts me a bit. So I think a few of them sound okay, but too many of them. And so I think we just got to get past it somehow.
Yep. We're going to get past it. But besides that, I think just listening to ourselves speak in general on the podcast is interesting. Oh, isn't it interesting? Oh, shoot, I said it again. Just because I don't think that that's how my voice sounds. It actually sounds pretty nice on the podcast. And I think my voice is generally not that nice.
You mean you think you sound nice or your voice sounds nice?
I think obviously my voice represents me. So I think I sound nice on the podcast when really I don't think I'm actually a very nice person.
In your own judgment?
Yeah.
Should we start
Maybe
taking
in my own head.
Should we start taking a straw poll?
Yeah.
Who thinks Sheila is nice?
Exactly.
Who thinks she's not nice?
If you take a poll on this podcast, I think everyone will think I'm very nice, but probably a lot of people that are listening to this podcast actually know me.
I think a lot of people who know you think you're nice.
Can be irritating at times.
Although I remember when we did the very first episode, you started and you said something like, "Hello, I'm Sheila Webster, John Webster's wife." And I'm like, who is that? That is so not you. That doesn't sound like you at all.
No.
Like, I remember the time.
Like, okay, let's get started. This is what's going on. This is what we're doing.
It reminds me of the dentist story when we were living in a certain city that I won't name so as to not to disclose the people involved, which may or may not represent reality.
Okay.
But Sheila,
don't know what you're talking
Sheila
about.
took the kids to a dentist for like a year.
Oh, yeah, the dentist. I
And-
thought you said the dentist
No,
story,
the
like you're talking
dentist.
about, the dentist.
So Sheila took the kids to the dentist for about a year, and I was really busy. It was a time of my career where I was like working crazy hours. And so I couldn't get in there. So I finally get into the dentist like a year later. And he's like, "What do you do?" And I told him what I do. And of course, he found it interesting and we chatted. And next thing you know, we got a card in the mail. I can't even really remember exactly what happened.
Yeah, we got a card in the mail thanking you for choosing his practice for your family.
Right.
And I was so mad because, first of all, you had nothing to do with it. And, you know, I'm the one that organized it, and I'm the one that made you go to the appointment like 100 times and over and over and over. And eventually you got there. And then we get a thank you card like literally 2 days after your appointment.
Literally?
Literally.
There's another one.
Do we say that a lot?
Well, not too much, but quite a bit. And then you just, I know we're almost done, but then the other thing was the reason that
Oh, by the way, we switched dentists.
yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Sheila switched dentists. I'm like, really? Why did we switch dentists? I found out after.
Yeah.
And then the other one that drove her crazy was that she bought a car, but she had her own business. So when you have your own business, it's sometimes hard to get a loan. So you need a co-signer. So I co-signed, but it was her car. She picked it. She dealt with the dealer. She did everything. All I did was co-sign. And the dealer kept sending letters and emails to us that said, Mrs. John Webster.
Mrs. John, not even like to John Webster. It was to Mrs. John Webster.
So eventually I had to go in there, and they weren't close either. I had to do like a 20, 25 minute drive.
Well, because we did call a few times and
Right.
ask them to please change that.
And I said, look, guys, the next time you say Mrs. John Webster, she's literally going to bring the car back and drop it off in your doorstep and get out one of her own money. So please stop doing that.
I think that's a good use of literally, because I was literally going to do that.
And then anyway, so that's why when on that first episode you said, I'm Sheila, I'm John Webster's wife.
I didn't say Mrs. John Webster.
No,
though.
but still, just the way you said it, it made me think back to that incident.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm not, anyway.
Yeah.
So basically, it's interesting, it's funny, and so
100%.
100%, I think we're done. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way. That is a wrap on episode 4. And I normally talk about what I'm going to do next week physically. I'll return to that next week. But today I want to say something about how I'm feeling grateful for 2 reasons. First of all, I got so much out of my interview with Scott Williams. I not only learned a lot, but I had a breakthrough with my thoughts about the diversity of people and how we can describe ourselves and each other in a richer way if we open our minds, listen to others, and expand our vocabulary. And then there's my book, Accidentally Well. As of this week, it's published and it's available on Amazon, other book sites.
Yay!
And I have a book website called accidentallywell.com. And, just a great feeling. It started off as scribblings and notes in 2018, and then it became a paragraph here and a half page there. Then I started organizing chapters. Then I asked people for feedback, which helped me figure a whole bunch of things out. And there's many stories along the way, but now my book's out there and now the podcast is happening. And I hope they inspire people to try and keep trying, to try and find a way to find balance that works for them. And if it helps even 1 or 2 people, then it's all going to be worth it. So my fingers are crossed. So with all that, I'm feeling very, very grateful to the people who helped me make these things happen. I plan to thank the people who helped me with the book on a show one of these days. But for today, I'm just feeling really grateful, and it's a wonderful state of mind. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yes, and it's just great that it's actually out there, that all the hard work is done, and now you have to sit back and get some feedback. So hopefully you all enjoy it
Which is nerve-wracking.
and read it.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's
So how about you,
exciting.
Sammy? What you got going on?
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thanks.
First off, on the book. That's amazing. This past week I was pretty busy just going to my yoga classes, which was awesome. I feel really good about that. And this coming week is going to be pretty busy for me as well because it's my cousin's wedding.
And you're in the wedding.
I am in the wedding. So we got lots of stuff this week. We got to get our nails done. We got the rehearsal dinners. We got another dinner. And then we got the wedding on Friday.
It's really exciting because I'm going to the wedding. And this is first time in years since we've actually had something to, like a party to go to.
It's
But
exciting.
is anyone else a bit nervous? I mean, I'm still a bit nervous about being around all those people in a small room for it, but...
No,
Yeah.
I'm not nervous.
No, we're just going to go for it.
For me,
No, I
I'm
can
like-
understand people being nervous,
Yeah.
but I'm not. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and for me, I've had 3 vaccines and I got COVID. So I feel like I'm safe, hopefully, knock on wood. But yeah, so it's going to be really exciting to see everybody and be in a group and get all dressed up and have fun. How about you, Sheila? What do you got going on?
Well, I don't have much going on, actually. I worked a lot last week, so I'm going to try not to work so much. I'm going to do some yoga, and I just wanted to do a shout out because it's Steven's birthday this week, so happy birthday to him. And that's it.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Well, have a great week, everybody.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.